noise from my area. Noise from my area. Okay. Well, good evening, all. Welcome to the April 5th meeting of the Road Planning Committee for Kennebunkport. As usual, we'll start off with introductions of members and guests. Dan Saunders, Janet.
Hi, I'm Janet Powell.
Paul.
Paul Hogan over here. My screen name says Jerry Fitzgerald, my wife, tonight.
There you go. Werner.
Werner Gilliam.
This shows of mine. Jim McMahon.
James McMahon.
All right. Liz.
Liz Johnson.
And Eli.
Eli Rubin.
All right. All right, thank you all. So we'll hop right into it. So Eli or Werner, one of you guys going to take the lead?
Yeah, Werner,
Yeah.
do you want to share it on your screen?
Yep, absolutely. I'll go ahead and share the document that was sent to you all.
Hopefully it made sense to everyone this time. We just posted, the same everywhere. So to avoid confusion.
Oops. What page is that? 16?
Yes, that's page 16. So that's the beginning of the transportation section.
So I opened the PDF and I'm looking at a whole different unblacklined starting on my transportation starts on 14. But I know you sent two different
Is this the Word
documents.
document, the one that's been edited?
Yes. Yeah, I have the
I
Word
think that's
document
the
open.
difference between, there's a PDF that doesn't have this, and then the Word is the one that's marked up.
When my option said download or see preview, and so I went to the preview. That seems simpler, and I got a different document. And when I hit, just so you guys know for the future, when I hit goals and strategies, the hyperlink didn't work at all. But now I'm going to try the Word.
Is that on the agenda or on the
Yeah.
website?
No, the agenda, the one that was sent out by April
Okay, good to
a while
know.
back.
Looking
Yep.
at that.
I think that's what happened last time. But it's,
Okay.
if you go into Word, that
Yeah,
the
I got it.
attached Word document, it's okay.
Thank you.
And Werner, I think we'll start on number 33 on the next page.
Yeah, you mean whenever we drop down here?
Yeah, because we've gone through that. Yeah.
We ended on 32.
Do we have any
for the
guests?
for the
And how many?
transportation piece? Yeah, there we go.
So my Word document has no pages. So how do I find a page? I can tell you how many words. Transportation, I got it. I finally found it. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, that's correct. So we did do down through 32 in the transportation section. So we'll pick up where we left off. And that would be with number 33. So, all right. Number 34. So the policy here is, and I'll just go ahead and jump right in unless anybody has any other questions at the moment. So the policy is to develop a connected network of streets and destinations. And the first strategy is work with the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust to enhance trail connectivity. And our recommended amendment here is also to add within that the rec department as another party, another responsible party here.
PD, remind me, is
Planning department. I know, I always think of like, why is the police department on this one? But yeah, that's planning department.
and why Public Works? No, I mean Mike. I thought Mike sort of was working
Well,
in terms of connectivity with the roads and etc. But-
Yeah, I mean, Mike, Mike Claus, when he was Public Works Director, we know he worked specifically with, the widening of shoulders and things of that nature. Where this was talking more about trails, we left this as, the Conservation Trust, Planning Department and Rec Department. At this point, we haven't necessarily had Public Works involved in the creation of any types of trails. Although, with these types of strategies, I mean, if it's such the plan that the town were to ever do any types of trails on town-owned property, we would obviously engage Public Works in that.
Okay. You don't want them as a lead, as one of the leads. And I agree there shouldn't be 5 leads, 4 leads.
So then our next strategy, enhance the connectivity of trail systems in the vicinity of Gravelly Brook Road and Goose Rocks Road. And this one here, we just, where we've already talked about trail connectivity, just we're recommended to consider removing that because it's already been generally addressed in, in the previous strategy.
Sure. Makes sense.
Number 37, discourage cul-de-sacs and consider limiting length of dead-end streets to encourage connectivity and reduce vehicle miles traveled and commute times. And what we're recommending, that this be reworded to say, add criteria within subdivision regs that require developers to show future connectivity to adjacent parcels.
So Werner, wouldn't we want the same thing up above in connectivity in terms of trails, not just roads? Like village parcel abuts certain subdivisions, and if you were designing them today and you were doing something with the village parcel, it would seem you would want to have the same sort of requirement for trails.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's if you spend any time with any trail network, I mean, they're usually loop trails, they don't tend to be dead end trails. I mean, I think that's, an integral part of, of doing any kind of trail network is that you look to see where you can do potential connections and tie-ins. So are you suggesting that we spell that out somewhere on there?
Well, it kind of fits in with 30, whatever, and 38 is now numbered. I'm confused. I'm looking at yours, which is different than mine. The one where it's work with the KCT to encourage trail connectivity. They obviously have the most trails.
Right.
But the town might have trails on the village parcel. And in the future, it would just seem to me it should be on, a checklist for consideration, and seen positively by a planning board. If somebody says, "Oh, next door is this," we'll connect to that. We have that. We have so much open space, etc.
You're going to encourage an easement if it's private property.
Yeah.
Right.
So we can add a little bit of language here in this particular piece of criteria, requiring developers to show future connectivity to adjacent parcels. We can add a little bit in there that this isn't just, isn't just intended to deal with roads, but, we would want to consider, trail connectivity as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure where you put it because this one specifically talks about cul-de-sacs
Right.
and dead ends. So it's kind of limiting in terms of its strategy.
Can we back up for a second? Still 37, but what's wrong with a cul-de-sac or a
I
dead end?
agree. I'm questioning why there's
We
a lot of
purposefully
non-conforming.
looked
So-
at that when we moved here.
So I want to be clear that what we're suggesting is to replace this strategy with this strategy.
Future connectivity to adjacent parcels. Okay.
What planners generally don't like about cul-de-sacs and dead-end streets is that they lead to traffic because you have people only able to come in and only able to come out one way. So it causes traffic at intersections at particular times of day, perhaps school starts. Whereas if neighborhoods are connected, they tend to spread out, whether you're on your bicycle or on your in your car, etc. So that's the planning. That's the planning notion.
Connecting development areas via trail. But my worry about connecting via road is then we're going to ultimately end up with this grid-like
New York City.
suburban area.
Well,
where everything's connected, and I don't know that people want that.
Well, and I think that those types of preferences, are fine, to have, I would tell you that it's generally considered good planning practice to connect your developed areas and not perpetuate, numerous dead end streets.
Right,
Although,
right.
and recognize that, again, this, what we're suggesting here is to, eliminate this discouragement language, but instead to adding encouragement language here that tells the developer of a future subdivision to say, hey, look at those adjacent properties, next door, that may be vacant, and at least, have within your plan, an allowance for some future connectivity to that piece, so that, you don't have, multiple dead end streets just lined up next to each other.
Right.
It's trying to not wind up with, necessarily with a lot of property that is, cut off, that has access cut off to it. It's a sound planning practice to look at, where where and how you can provide connectivity. Doesn't mean that somebody can't propose a subdivision that doesn't have that. It's just saying, hey, developer, look at what's around you, and if there's, property that makes sense, show some type of potential future access.
Yeah.
So to incorporate the comment from Paul, how does this sound for replacing the language with add criteria and subdivision regs that require developers to show future connectivity to adjacent parcels, including roads and trails?
Sure. Yeah, and the other piece with cul-de-sacs, Liz, is it also can add to your infrastructure costs. And it certainly adds to emergency response time. If you thought of every road was a cul-de-sac, you got to get to that right road off that one street in order to get to your response. So
Yeah.
And the town has taken a very strong position recently, the Board of Selectmen anyway, that they won't allow any road that doesn't have some public benefit, I think that's what they call it, to become a public street. Like subdivisions get built and they immediately want to turn it over, the developer wants to turn it over to the town. And the town, 5 years ago, 10 years ago said, no more. We don't want any more private dead end streets because.
Which they should. It should be.
There's no
maintain
benefit to,
private
it's not
property.
meeting some of the current desires to connect.
Right,
So-
people want to do that because they don't want to maintain.
Well, they don't want
roads.
to plow.
They
They don't
plow
want
and
the town to plow them.
Right, so I don't have a problem with cul-de-sacs, and the people that buy into those should assume their own responsibility. I would believe the same thing. Don't turn it over because it's a dead end road. But yeah, I see what you're saying, Warner. I just hope we're not. If the developer and people have the desire to live in a cul-de-sac for privacy, and we should consider that and not outweigh it because of other issues.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is for the development of property that doesn't have a buyer yet to it.
Right.
And so if folks decide that is that's a deal breaker in terms of a real estate transaction, then so be it. But it's just in terms of, a future planning tool, it's a good criteria to have, in your subregs that you look at ways to, potentially connect properties, that are, that aren't developed yet.
Via road, we're saying.
Correct. Yes. Via road.
Right.
Yep.
Right, and some places are non-conforming. I mean, you may not have the ability.
That's right.
to do it.
Not every property is going to be, is going to make sense for that,
Mhm.
and that's something that the planning board, has to grapple with, and make decisions, based on that. Not every property is going to fit that criteria.
Okay.
Yeah, that works.
So the next strategy that we have here was promote shared driveways and subdivision road connectivity. It's a similar themed strategy here. It looks like we moved that from the reduced traffic, from the policy on reducing traffic congestion at a previous meeting.
So why do we
you know-
need and add subdivision road connectivity again if we just said that?
Yeah,
What's the
and that's fine.
what-
It accomplishes that. It's along the same theme.
Yeah, we should try to roll that all into, I mean, the shared driveways piece. I don't know how you pull that into,
Yeah, I mean,
I guess that's a
typically,
benefit, but
really what you're doing there is, if you're encouraging, shared driveway, and I tend to think of that as being, 2, maybe 3 properties, that you're dealing with. It just reduces the amount of curb cuts that you have,
Mhm.
and, also just encourages, less, less road construction, things of that nature. 12-foot wide driveway to serve 2 lots is more, is more than adequate, as far as access. And I think that's really, the thought process there is that you can do shared driveways.
Which have been done always anyway.
That's right. Yeah. Yep. It's a
Historically.
common.
That one doesn't have a number. Is that meant to be 30?
I think it's a goal.
Yeah, what is
No, it will have a number. It's just that was newly added. That's just the formatting, because we
So,
moved it from the prior
Can it be
section.
merged with 37 and say add criteria and subdivision regs that promote shared driveways and require developers to show future blah, blah, blah?
No. Yeah, I think
We
that
could
would be
do that.
fine.
yeah, I think, exactly, I agree with your point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gets rid of a strategy.
Right. One less line.
Okay,
One less line.
great.
Goals to get below 100 total. All right.
All right. So moving along, next policy: enhance access to waterfront recreation and other amenities. The strategy is continue to issue beach parking stickers to residents and visitors. We just, suggested here to add the add town clerk to that in terms of, a responsible party.
Porter, I'm confused. The 33 was a goal, 34 was a policy. And with adding the promote shared, well, we're moving that up.
Right.
Yep.
We're moving on to a policy that doesn't, is this another policy under the goal that is integrate transportation and land use planning?
Yes, it's
Okay, I'm
under
sorry.
the,
Okay.
yeah, we're still
Okay.
under the kind of the transportation.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry
we're still
sorry for
under.
interrupting.
Yeah, no worries. It's,
That's okay.
it's been a couple weeks, so it's we gotta get back. We gotta get back on the bike here, So
Thank you. Okay. All right.
so that was just the beach, the beach sticker
Yeah.
piece there.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a fun one. Consider metered parking in areas of high demand and consider establishing a parking benefits district where meter revenues are dedicated to neighborhood improvements.
Oh,
We're going to recommend the removal of this one.
yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed.
That's a headache.
That's a
All
whole
right.
other $100,000 software upgrade, right? Like the short-term rental one.
Yeah, I don't even know what poor department will get saddled with this one, but I'm going to pull a not it on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, limit together.
So, all right, next one, 41. Formalize overflow parking policies for events with that should say RSU and other landowners. And I think we already have that piece established, so we're recommending removal of that. So that's already addressed within town regs.
I can't see of a reason why we need that as a strategy to support that, right?
I mean, it's already addressed. It's already addressed in ordinance and some other policies that the town has. So it's done. It's a redundant. It's a redundant policy. So.
But if someone were to say, is that consistent with the comp plan? Do we need anything anywhere, any language to support that, or you think we're good within our text of?
I think we're fine within that.
Okay.
I don't know that we have to have redundant language in the comp plan to support, everything that we already have on the books.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the chapters itself is for us supportive enough. Okay.
Yeah. So next strategy says review and reduce as needed off-street parking requirements for residential use. And we're just tweaking the language on that slightly to say review and make recommendations for off-street parking requirements for residential use. And that's planning board and planning department for that one.
Sure.
Next policy, maintain compatibility between transportation infrastructure and surroundings. And so first strategy for that is coordinate with MDOT to ensure that transportation improvement projects on Route 9 and North Street are consistent with the character of the neighborhood. And so we're removing planning department with that and adding public works. For that one.
Okay.
Next strategy, investigate the merits of separate roadway design standards for designated rural and growth areas. And so we're just tweaking that one slightly to say investigate the merits of separate roadway design standards for designated rural and growth areas for subdivisions.
Can you just briefly give a quick explanation of what that standard may be?
Well, we don't have a municipal roadway design standard. So, what we're doing here is we're saying that this is for, for subdivisions.
Not for existing roadways.
Right, exactly. Not for existing roadways.
Right.
So next strategy, consider designating scenic byways to protect winding tree-lined roads. Again, a slight tweak to that one. Consider identifying scenic byways for future preservation. That's planning board and planning department.
What is that? What is that? Is that like trying to minimize the traffic on particular roads? Or what?
No, you know, so if you look back at the policy, maintain compatibility between transportation infrastructure and surroundings. And so really what this is that, you know, it's, you know, if you have a particular roadway that's considered, you know, that's considered scenic, you know, I mean, that may be a roadway that you don't, you know, that you know, want to give some serious thought if the conversation ever comes up to widening or something of that nature, that, you know, you should at least take into consideration, you know, the scenic vistas that may be along that way before you consider any kind of, you know, widening or something of that nature.
Mhm.
So when you say future preservation, you mean like a designation of some kind, that this is, you know, that Arundel Road between here and here is a scenic byway.
Sure. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
you know, for example, you know, let's take Route 9 over by you know, Hathaway's, you know, sheep
Mhm.
farm, you know, is a good example there of a very, you know, kind of, you know, very much a scenic byway. And, you know, identifying that as a scenic byway, and again, not that I would ever expect, you know, DOT to say, boy, we got to widen this thing out, and, you know, I mean, you know, or anything of that nature, but
We'll be
those
over
are
the cliff.
right. But those are the things that it's helpful to identify as saying, you know, it's important.
Yeah.
You know,
We've
this type of-
identified it as a place, you know, a spot that's important. And we're not going to give up anything easily.
That's right. We should, you know, like that as an example, we would say MDOT, you know, leave this alone.
Not putting a toll booth there.
But let me just
So-
ask a quick question, plain devil's advocate. Don't we have a list of all these places already? And most of them are seen from a road. So isn't it really the same? Like we have that sheep
Yeah.
farm and we have,
Yeah.
you know,
But I think they're
Everything is-
listed as places, and now we're talking about roads to get from one place to another that happen to go through or by those places.
okay. So it's really a different accomplishment. you
I interpret it to be more related to roads.
Well,
Yes,
Yeah.
is that true? We're talking about transportation. So.
Yes,
Okay.
right.
good.
Yeah, you're thinking about areas that you specifically see from, you know,
Right.
from roadways, and that could be,
Right.
you know, that could be affected by, you know, any particular change in
Mhm.
that roadway.
Mhm, mhm.
okay, I'm fine.
Next goal, reduce impacts to infrastructure due to climate change. First policy, integrate climate risk assessment and adaptation planning into prospective transportation projects. First strategy, conduct a comprehensive transportation vulnerability assessment to identify vulnerable assets and loss of connectivity due to sea level rise. And so we have that as the planning department, and so we've left that one as is.
Mhm.
Hey, Werner, can I just point out that we have 2 participants here? No one's got their hand up, but if anybody wants to make a comment of the non-member participants, they're welcome to raise their hand. We will try to watch out for it.
Okay, no, great. Thanks for keeping an eye on that. Just the way I've got the boxes arranged on the screen, I can't see that
Yeah.
part of the.
No, I know.
can't,
Yep.
I
can't
know.
see that part of the screen. So,
Okay, hold it down.
so next strategy, investigate impact to groundwater rise and extreme heat on transportation infrastructure. Eli, we had here a comment, look for duplication as strategy and remove if necessary, because we feel like, you know, I think we've mentioned this one a couple of times. And so we think we've got some potential duplication going on here with this one.
Mhm,
So
Right.
I'll take a look and try to find it.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Next strategy, conduct a town-wide inventory of culverts and continue to upgrade culverts to withstand extreme weather events and greater participation. This is something, Public Works has an inventory of, of all town-owned culverts. So, we just, conduct the inventory and,
Right.
left the supportive language in here to continue to upgrade the culverts to withstand extreme weather events and greater precipitation. Precipitation. Sorry about that.
Participation by the
McNuggets.
raindrops.
The
That's right.
We're getting to you.
That's right.
That's great.
And we left
Yeah.
that with Public Works. All right, next strategy. Reduce roadway and private drive width standards for roads that serve multiple buildings as a strategy to reduce impervious surfaces. We have that as Planning Board and Planning Department. Slight tweak to that one as well. Recommend, where appropriate, the reduction of width standards for roads that serve multiple buildings as a strategy to reduce impervious surfaces. So similar thought process there with the shared driveway concept.
They got to make sure they take into consideration, though, driving a ladder truck.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, down to that.
Still 12 feet, right?
Yeah.
Well, and that's, and so just to address that, Dan, that's anytime when we think about, access, that's always one of the first considerations that we incorporate is that we send, we ask for, comments from the fire department, in regard to, all right, what do you need, in order to make sure that you've got, adequate space here for a ladder truck, and any of your other apparatus. So
Sometimes getting them in is fine. It's getting them out.
right, exactly. Yep. So next strategy is encourage developers and residents to install and maintain pervious pavement in appropriate locations. It's Planning Board and Planning Department. And slight change of that where we said encourage builders and residents to install and maintain pervious pavers in appropriate locations. And, there's a subtle change in that language, and, I can talk just a little bit about that. Pervious pavement, from what I've seen and understand, that requires a fair amount of maintenance in order to maintain, the perviousness piece of it. What you typically have with that is that there's a certain size aggregate that's removed in the mix to allow for, for the drainage to occur on pavement. But what also happens, and specifically in coastal environments, is that they get clogged, with sediment, and so they require that tends to require a fair amount of maintenance. So the pervious pavers, tends to be, a different type of material that doesn't have, that same type of issue, but it's something that's more appropriate for, for a residential driveway, or something like that. So that's the reason for the recommendation in the language change. So we've seen, I want to say, I think it's down in Kittery, has a seasonal parking lot at one of their, ball fields that was done with, with pervious pavement. And it has to be seasonal use only, because otherwise it gets clogged up. So it's not, it's not a piece that gets used in the winter time, just because of the sand, any, the potential sand and sediment issues. Some communities that have a lot of pervious pavement, they literally have a vacuum, that has to, like a street, like an industrial street cleaner, but think of it.
And cleans up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Werner,
Think of it like just a big street vacuum.
Street cleaner,
So,
right. Oh, jeez.
Werner,
Right.
it would seem to be even better to encourage residents to keep surfaces that drain even better than pavers. And, you know, for example, many people have dirt, stone, etc., which retain and filter a lot better than pavement, pervious pavement, or pervious pavers. Shouldn't we be encouraging people in some way to not convert to, you know, property after property out at the beach is getting, you know, sometimes in conjunction with the, you know, a fancification of a house, sometimes not, but, you know, there were few paved driveways 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and now it's just becoming,
Hmm.
you know, an epidemic of them. And it seems like if we treat them the same as pavement, if we, you know, if we keep, if there isn't some way to favor as a strategy keeping it the way it is, or considering it as an alternative if you're building,
Mhm.
then people won't if you can afford not to.
Yeah,
Right.
no, it's a valid point. I would not encourage someone to have a dirt driveway, especially in a more urban environment, just because it's an erosion issue and it's a street cleaning issue. But you know, I understand the point. You know, as far as folks that are, you know, moving from a gravel driveway, you know, or some other type of, you know, crushed aggregate surface to, you know, just to a straight hot top, you know.
Mhm.
And
Particularly
you
if
know,
you're in the floodplain and in the shoreland zone.
Yeah. And you know, there's
we live in the Northeast. I mean, I'm not gonna discourage it, but you know, plowing is a lot easier with a pavement instead of in the springtime when I'm digging up a driveway and putting it on everybody's lawn. It's you know, I know people don't like driveways, paved driveways, but it kind of is easy to plow.
Oh, it sure is. It sure is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But a fair amount of these houses aren't even used in the winter, nor plowed.
Well, they should be plowed because the emergency vehicles need to get in there, and the insurance company probably wouldn't cover them if the fire truck can't get in there.
We don't have a regulation to require that, so it's not done in many cases. Insurance companies may tell you.
But
We're not encouraging more regulations, Jim.
we could change it to say install and maintain pervious material in appropriate locations.
Yeah, that's fine. You can remove the paver, you know, the paver language and just, you know, pervious material.
Yeah, I think that's better.
Mhm.
So the next strategy that we have here is upgrade and repair seawalls in the vicinity of Warwick Avenue and Spouting Rock Avenue. So we're suggesting to change that to, you know, more general of continue to upgrade and repair seawalls, and we're going to add public works along with that. I don't have a specific, you know, there's not a specific report here really that says, oh, you know, these seawalls here are in dire need of repair. I mean, we know which ones these are, and you know, they definitely get their fair share of, of wave action there. But I think it's just good to have this as a general, you know, upgrade and repair seawall strategy anyways. So hence why we kind of broadened it to include all seawalls.
And adding public works is just adding them to the conversation when that needs to happen, right? They're not in their wheelhouse to repair a seawall.
No, you know, so it ultimately, if we need to do a significant repair to a seawall, it's gonna be a public works project. And when I say a public works project, not necessarily that they're the ones doing it, but it would go through their budget process, and
Mhm,
it
mhm.
would be under their oversight.
One thing we've not considered sort of as a long-term issue back to the beach because of ownership of the beach. But now that ownership of the beach has been settled, I mean, it raises a question about what happens when, you know, houses have fallen into onto the beach, off of their foundations, rock walls have been washed away. Now it's known that you know, some of these the town owns most of the beach, and the only part of the beach it does not own are the 65 lots that are in the beach use agreement. But it kind of creates a bit of a mystery as to who has responsibility for maintaining those. They benefit, of course, not only the house right behind them, but houses beyond that. The ones up front are most vulnerable. And certainly if sea level rise and worse storms continue, there's going to be more of a problem than less of a problem. This has only happened on, you know, in the 38 storm and in the 70 storm, you know, where
I thought there was a storm that within the past decade where a lot of the rocks were moved and the homeowners weren't supposed to touch them and put them back. Does that ring a bell? It was a pretty severe storm, and I'm pretty sure this was at Goose Rocks. Maybe.
well, you have to, you know, you got to consult with the DEP, and
Right.
some things you don't need a permit for, and some
Okay.
things you do need a permit for. And that's
Okay.
always been a bit of a mystery to people. But the DEP now has pretty good
Okay.
regulations, and the beach committee is
Yeah.
going to try to promote and
Right.
publicize what the
And
differences
you would
are.
be, yeah, the beach committee would be a wonderful, you know, resource to find out what can and can't be done like that after a storm, right? Do you
Yeah,
think that this language should be somewhere in here, Paul?
Well, I guess I'm saying, what's the difference between, I don't know what the answer is. I'm
Mhm.
just saying, what's the difference between the ones we're talking about here and other
Right.
ones?
Well, I
Seawalls.
think what we can do is, in this particular strategy here, we can clarify that we're talking about, you know, publicly owned and maintained seawalls. You know, that's what this strategy is for.
Mhm.
Yeah, why don't we clarify that?
Yeah.
Which could include some at the beach,
Right.
I would just point out, but that would be fine. You don't have to bring that.
If it's publicly
They may
owned.
be on private land, they may be on
Yeah.
public land.
And that, because that may be so, but I wouldn't add any language, you know,
Mhm.
regarding those particular seawalls, because that, the
No, but I
town
think your
hasn't
publicly owned
taken a
takes care of
position
it.
on that.
I think your comment
Right.
takes care
Yeah,
of it.
publicly owned.
Okay, so I've updated the language to say continue to upgrade and repair publicly owned seawalls.
There you
Yes.
go.
Sounds good.
That's good.
So next strategy, plan for the possibility that some town roads or segments of town roads may require elevation to avoid inundation due to sea level rise. So with this one here, we're just adding the Board of Selectmen, Public Works, and Town Manager to that strategy.
Mhm.
That strategy comes out of 49, right? So
Yeah.
that,
They're very much, those are similar.
yeah. But one's doing the assessment, then the other one's putting the plan together to address, right?
Right.
Right. Okay.
All right. Moving along. So we're going to move on to recreation and cultural resources. So the first goal here is provide high quality parks and recreational facilities and the finest programs, athletic events and leisure activities. Boy, that sounds very high. So
Finest,
all right, the finest of programs.
means finest.
Continue to offer an array of recreation and cultural programs, classes, and opportunities for residents of all ages, and identify opportunities to enhance recreational and cultural resources.
Wow.
So,
Mm.
first priority or strategy here, prioritize the maintenance of existing recreational facilities and areas. And so with this one here, we're suggesting a change to support the creation of a recreation master plan. And, so what you're going to see here is this is the rec committee here that's responsible party.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't the point of that? I'm not talking about Kennebunkport specifically, but generally, it's kind of people just try to look to the shiny object out front and let other things deteriorate. And isn't the point of this strategy to take care of what we have and don't let it get to the point where every place I've lived, I've been in meetings where someone says, oh, well, if we'd only maintained these tennis courts, we wouldn't be asking, we wouldn't have needed, where the critics would say.
Mhm.
So I thought
Yeah.
that was the point of this specific one, to say, let's take care of what we have and take care of it well before we go look to the next shiny object.
Well, and I think that's something that, as one, I think you need, a rec department and your rec facilities, need to be nimble to some degree, and being able to, needing to be able to look at and say, all right, what are the current recreational needs of the community?
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of a recreational master plan is that it lets them identify and address that in that type of plan. Because you may find that there are facilities that, and maybe maintenance is the issue, but there may be facilities that are underutilized or no longer used. And I think it's important to try to figure out why, whether it is just the lack of maintenance or something else, that those facilities aren't being used. And, the rec master plan, I think the idea behind it is that it'll give them, the opportunities to be able to maybe repurpose a facility that's not being used into something that, that is, in greater demand by the residents.
Sure. Is it something they've begun to work on? That's why you're suggesting you came up with this language?
Yes. Yeah. So they are in the, this was something that was identified, in our latest budget discussions, with the budget board. And I believe this is something that shows up on the capital, on the capital plan, is moving forward with this type of recreation master plan.
Mm-hmm.
Should it be recreation or recreational? What's the right
Recreations?
Probably
Probably recreational.
There's an S there.
Recreation,
That's
the
why.
name,
Yeah.
Recreation Department Master Plan. Maybe
Yeah.
you just don't need the S, Recreation
Eli-
Master Plan.
We should
So
look,
Department of
Eli, and just make sure that what we have here is just consistent with what's on the
Budget.
on the capital plan and the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So we can do that.
There
We
you
can
go.
tweak that.
And I agree the next one could be taken away because they've already
Yeah.
done this. They have a very detailed website of their own that is now interactive, and you can
Yeah.
pay, and you can,
Good.
they've improved that greatly in the past few years. So I would
Yep.
agree with your comment to remove it.
So next strategy is to maintain and expand virtual recreation and cultural opportunities. And we just left that one as written. So next strategy, number 6, says develop Parsons Field into a multi-use space that supports active recreation and specific programming such as splash pads, sports fields, roller hockey, pickleball, and other uses identified by the Parks and Recreation Department and residents. And so along that same line, with the master plan, we're suggesting to tweak that a little bit to say, identify locations for programs such as splash pads, sports fields, roller hockey, pickleball, and other uses identified by the Parks and Recreation Department and residents as part of the Recreation Master Plan.
Okay.
All right. Next.
Just to go real quick to go back to what Paul was saying, should we be putting identifying existing locations instead of like when he's saying expanding out, we should be maintaining and improving what we got? I don't know if that was a concern.
I got the impression that that was the intent because it got rid of a very specific place and it made it more general. In other words, identify locations in town where these programs can take place. I mean, was there a pickleball? I shouldn't even bring it up because I'm not sure. Wasn't pickleball established over by the public works
Beechwood.
area?
Yeah, they put a very nice job.
That was creative, I thought. So it's kind of identifying current and future and potential locations, I would think.
Yeah, and as a general practice, we always look to the existing locations and existing facilities. Obviously it's a much bigger process and a much larger process to try to, develop a raw piece of property into something like this that, winds up going through a much more extensive, process. So next strategy, identify public locations that could be used year-round for community gatherings such as concerts. And so we tweak that to say identify public locations that could be used year-round for community gatherings as a part of a recreation master plan.
I think that's good.
So next strategy, involve residents in long-term recreational and cultural resource planning efforts. So we left that one as is.
Okay.
Next strategy, develop a community center with resources and services for seniors. And so that one we just changed that to say continue to support the rec department in programming for seniors. Next strategy, collaborate with the Kennebunkport Conservation Trust to develop and manage a trail network that allows for a variety of outdoor recreational experiences while sustaining wildlife habitats and corridors. Our Rec Committee and Conservation Trust. And this one, as we just got done going through in transportation, we'd recommend just consider removing that since it's already been mentioned. And then likewise, so the next strategy, identify opportunities for volunteers to support trail construction and maintenance opportunities. Again, also consider removing that since it's already managed, by KCT.
Yep.
Number 12, encourage organizations to promote cultural programs on the town website. We're recommending the removal of that.
I still think that we have a little way to go in terms of communicating. I mean, I do realize that when there are opportunities like the strategy session at the Nonantum, or
Mhm.
perhaps some of the environmental lectures that we've done, there are usually people who say they didn't know about it. And I still think that that continues to
I agree.
be a you know, a bit of a complaint. And I don't have the answer to it right now, but I still think we should work on communication with the community. I think we had talked about using our newsletter more when we needed to inform or educate people. I still think that communication and education piece is important. But
Yeah.
as I said, I don't have the answer tonight, but
And
we should, I'd like to, I think it would be a good idea to you know, think about and improve the ways that we do that.
And I'm not
Yeah.
sure the town website is necessarily
Right. Yeah.
the place for that, which is
Right.
already
Yeah.
complex. It
Right.
serves
A
many
lot of other
masters.
stuff going on in town, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, and this is just a practice that we wouldn't allow. We
Yeah.
just, we're not going to allow other organizations to promote their activities on a town
That's a
owned
good
and
point.
operated website. So,
from that vantage point, then that's definitely appropriate to remove it. If you're especially, you know, for that reason alone.
But
But the intent,
well,
I think, is let's find someplace to.
But the rec has its own website, right?
for their own
Really
programs.
alternative.
Yeah. for
That's
their
right.
program.
that's
The
right.
problem is I think it's very, as Janet is sort of suggesting, it's very diverse and all over the place and many sources. And if you wanted to say what's happening this weekend,
Right.
I'm having company and maybe we want to do something, you almost have to look in like 20 places.
Exactly.
You could look at the resorts collection stuff. You could look at the Chamber of Commerce stuff. You could go on some Facebook groups. You could, you know, we don't have, you know, we do have still a weekly newspaper that, you know, covers a minimal amount of activities. You know, groups can write their own articles, but it's kind of very, very all over the place. I think that's the problem. It's
I
fragmented.
think you're right. It's fragmented.
On strategy 13, you can actually have that as part of the businesses and nonprofits collaborating on some kind of a website that encourages all that information.
Yeah, and I think I mean, it's kind of different than 13. That has to do with suitable locations for events and gatherings, but the same kind of notion could be in 12. And I don't know who would be the appropriate party in the town, but it would seem like the town should be concerned with this and try to move this forward. Maybe it's the recreation department. Maybe it's, you know, I don't know. But
I mean, I don't see where the town should get involved in that. In my opinion, that's Chamber of Commerce could step up.
that's for the for-profit stuff that makes money.
Yeah, that's
Well-
not what we're talking. We're talking about free programs, educational programs, lectures. I mean, some of that the library takes care of, but
Right. Well, I mean, that should be the individual organizations that are doing that do that.
Right, but
you know,
but we even have
Maybe
trouble
maybe-
communicating our committee's events, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right. And part of the problem is we don't even have community bulletin boards anymore. There's very few places.
Right. The
you know.
libraries, the post office bulletin board's about 8 by 10.
Right.
But
Pretty
can you
small.
elaborate on the wording on 13 to include, you know, to try to promote that cultural programs in there as well, along with the suitable locations for events and gatherings?
Well, I think they're
Well-
considering removing it. But
No,
Yeah,
I
so-
don't want, if you don't, I don't want to remove it. I would say add it to 13. Somehow change the wording to add it in there. So again, you know, if nobody wants, if you instill in businesses or nonprofits, say, hey, collaborate on a website where you can share all this information about events, gatherings, and cultural programs.
right,
It'll feed itself. You know what I mean? It's just a suggestion, but
right.
maybe not just a website, but other offerings.
Right.
I
There's so
don't
many
want to keep it
ways.
light. You gotta put, that's my recommendation, to put it,
Mhm.
somehow reword it, put it in 13.
Right, so all of us residents want this to stay here. We want something in number 12 to
Right.
reference enhancing community building and a promotion of events so that the community becomes more of a community
Right.
and less of just individuals and businesses
Everyone in their own
advertising,
orbit. Yeah,
advertising things to tourists.
exactly.
So I don't know who would play the central role there. We don't have a communication department in town hall.
You know,
Really,
I think the opportunity does lie with the Chamber of Commerce, right? I mean, their goal is to get people here. And part of that is certainly talking about all the wonderful things they can provide for money. But there's
Right, but
also
we're-
all the things
we're trying to focus on the community,
That's
not
what I'm trying to get,
necessarily
yes.
the tourists.
Yeah.
No, but they'll talk about if it's done well, they're also going to bring up all these other opportunities that you have that don't cost anything to come to our town. Right? And you kind of work in collaboration.
Not if their members aren't
No.
making money off it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people pay for that, and it really does, it supports businesses. It's not it doesn't support nonprofit programs,
So
as I understand it from my own experience.
you know, they also have Facebook pages that are intended for the Chamber of Commerce, but it's a lot
Well,
of.
that doesn't reach the whole audience either.
It reaches
know,
all
I
the
mean-
community members, and there's a lot of people that are on there, that 3 towns, 1 community. So, you know, I'm just, you know, I'd like to
No,
see it
you're bringing up, you're bringing up a point where there are some channels that maybe we're not using. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of something that's a little more centralized that would deal with, that would support community, a sense of community in Kennebunkport.
Right, so why not, if it's not at 13, just.
Well, you could say-
Encourage a strategy to come up with suggestions for it, keep it in there, but, you know, I don't know, what is it, library, is that L, is that what that? Right
It
now?
could say, we could say partner with businesses, nonprofits, the school district, and other relevant parties to
Right.
to better communicate with residents and others about, you know, this is the section on culture and recreation, you know, on community events, and then let somebody try to brainstorm with these people to say, I mean, if the 4 of us on this call think there's a problem, there's probably a problem. So
It's been in surveys, it's been in the workshops. This issue keeps coming forward.
and part of it is we've lost traditional print advertising.
Yeah.
Everybody used to subscribe to the York, you know, and what's the name of that paper? That daily
Post?
paper?
The Post,
No, not the Post.
York Star,
Star.
County Star.
Yeah, the County Star.
Yeah.
Most of our, you know, 15 years ago, everybody
Yeah.
subscribed to that I
It's
knew.
true. People
Now
look
I don't
like
know anyone who
papers.
subscribes to it.
No,
So-
it's true.
We've had a changing media
Yeah,
circumstance, and it's impacted what people know about what's going on, even as we've have new Facebook groups and other
right.
kinds of. But is there something that we could do to acknowledge this issue and improve? I don't know what the
Right.
solution is, but
Encourage a way to promote, a way to communicate and to promote.
Can
Well, I
I,
think-
can I
Maybe,
offer-
maybe Eli can work his magic here.
I don't think this is anything that the town should do. I think I
Okay.
agree with removing all of them.
Oh, wow.
I am totally on where the organizations that's putting something together, it's up to them to throw it out there. If we need to improve the way we are handling and communicating the GPC, I'm all up to that we should try to do something different. But I don't think we should spend any town resources sort of pulling this all together for the benefit of nonprofits and for-profits.
the 3 of us do, Dan.
Well, that's
Yeah.
good. And
Can
you-
I offer maybe a middle ground here? So
Sure.
the language in 12 would read, encourage businesses, nonprofits, and the RSU 21 to better communicate with residents and others about cultural programs in an organized and central location. And the responsible party could be listed as the library. And what that could look like is just communicating with the library that this is a need that's identified from residents, but it's not necessarily something that the town has capacity to be working on. And, you know, maybe there's a synergy or collaboration that could be built from there. But that it's not necessarily a town department who's the primary responsible party.
Right.
Yeah. Then that offloads it from the town website, which is ultimately the goal for 12.
Right. That was a solution
Right.
that we're not sure makes any sense, but
Right.
the concern we have.
Mhm.
Jen, how do you feel about the library giving this a think and trying
I
to?
mean, you know, the library will go out of its way to support things that are going on. We have a sandwich board. Usually it's tasked with promoting its own programs and the things that are happening at the library.
Right.
And I think in some ways, the community room on the third floor on the second floor, is one of the very few rooms in town where people could get together and have an event. It is an event space, you know, until perhaps sometime in the future, if we have a new municipal building that also has a meeting space. I can't think of, other than the firehouse, I can't really think of another place where people meet.
Atlantic Hall, they meet.
Well,
They
maybe,
meet-
yeah, maybe
they meet
that's.
They meet
Yeah.
at that place on opposite the post office, that
Right.
community
Well,
center.
those are spaces that you have to rent. You have to reserve and you pay for them. If you're a resident of the town, you get a break. I don't think you pay at Atlantic Hall, but there, you
And
know,
the trust.
it's not like the doors are open and you can walk in and plan something or speak to someone to plan it. There are spaces. You're absolutely right. I do think a lot of groups use the community house across from the post office.
But if you have collaboration with those businesses or nonprofits, the word's gonna get out. They may make opportunities available to the community, you know.
But
and,
I
I'd
think
be
we're
happy to
confusing.
speak to Mary Lou and have a conversation about this very thing, though. I'd be happy to do it and I'll report back.
But we're
You know,
confusing,
so-
I still think we're confusing two issues. One is space. Do we have space? Should we have more space? Are those spaces identified? And the second is there a central way we could better communicate information about cultural events, public affairs, scientific, you know, kinds of things, so that you could find it easier.
Right.
That language that I said was for strategy 12, and it would,
12.
and so then we still could address number 13 regarding the
Right.
space.
Yeah, I think
Right.
yours
So
12
one
work.
thing that
In
I
addition,
think
one
it's
thing
good
that
what
you
you
do
wrote,
have,
what you came up with.
one thing that the town does have that, you know, as I've listened to this, that, you know, that and it just makes me wonder why we haven't discussed it yet. Maybe it's because nobody looks at it anymore. But we have a public access channel where things are identified and advertised, you know, so many of the things that, you know, that are being discussed get put up on that community bulletin board. So, you know, I do think it's important to recognize that just with the advent of technology, we look for things differently. You know, I mean, I just personally, if I'm in a place where I'm like, I wonder what's going on, you know, this weekend, you know, things that I could do, you know, with the kids. I honestly wind up going to Facebook, you know, to see what kind of events are being proactively advertised by organizations within the area. And I look for those, and, you know, I think that's, you know, those organizations, it's up to them to do, you know, that, make that proactive step to promote their events. I wouldn't necessarily see that as, you know, I wouldn't go to the town, you know, to the town's website to look for that. I would look for it elsewhere.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is this is like recreation. This is a pretty big umbrella. the idea that, you know, we're putting recreation and cultural activity in the same, you know, in the same box. And maybe when you want to do something with your kids, you're not thinking, well, maybe you are thinking recreation. You know, where if you wanted to do something in town that has to do with recreation, you go to the rec website, obviously. I'm thinking about more of the needs of the year-round residents, a lot of whom are a little bit older, and they have a different way of approaching that very thing. They don't go to Facebook.
Yeah,
So
well, maybe they're still watching the cable
think about
channel.
this and talk to a few people. Maybe, you know, maybe some ideas will pop up. But I think what Eli did with 12 sounded good. But I do think, you know, I think I just need to talk. We need to talk it up maybe among folks in town and see what their thoughts are. There's maybe some better ideas out there that we haven't come up with. So
yeah,
I'll be talking about it.
yeah. Like I said, you know, and maybe that demographic is still looking at, you know, the cable channel.
Oh,
I don't know if anyone ever looked
I
at
don't think anybody does.
honestly.
That's
Yeah.
terrible.
I don't know.
So then were there edits for number 13 then? That would be
Yeah.
to partner with businesses, nonprofits to identify suitable locations? Or were we happy with the wording in number 7?
Yeah, again, keep in mind that this strategy is talking about physical locations.
Right.
You know, we just felt that it was, you know, there was some redundancy with
Yeah,
number 7.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think that we are doing that. I mean, I think that we do seek out, for example, using the nonantum for the committee event, or the library for certain things. And right now we're using the firehouse. I mean, there's still that meeting room. We aren't using it really because of COVID, but it's available.
Yeah, I would take out 13.
Yeah, I would take it out.
Right?
Okay. All right. So number 14, continue to host seasonal events that provide social and cultural opportunities for residents and visitors. And so you can see here, we're just adding the other organizations and groups that typically are engaged in that already to begin with. So that's library, historical society, Chamber of Commerce, and the Business Association.
Does the Chamber of Commerce have an events website?
They do. I think it's called the Anchor. It's through the Chamber of Commerce.
What's on it?
Well, they will. I mean, when, for example, when the maritime launch,
Yeah.
like when if there's a seasonal festival of some sort, you can scroll and find everything that's happening in all the restaurants and what's going on, the events for that. But they do have it. It's called the Anchor, and it's pretty regularly updated with things that are going on.
Why couldn't everything that we're talking about, cultural events and whatever, be on that?
Well, that's the Chamber of Commerce. It's business. It's for profit.
Oh.
You'd have to encourage buy-in from them. I'm sure that you could volunteer to have them do it. It's really up to them.
Yeah,
They may want to do it, but
it's
it all
worth
depends
an
what they want to
ask,
do.
right? I don't know if they do it, but it's worth an ask.
And again, it's just not often a question that we hear. You know, like we don't get calls, you know, of folks saying, we have no idea what to do in town this weekend.
I'm going to call you this weekend because I think you, Werner, have your finger on the pulse of everything. I'm calling you. What can we do this weekend, Werner?
However, Janet did bring up a point 15 minutes ago that I agree with, that we do need to advertise town meeting type things, like the thing at the Nonantum, looking for input better, because people don't actively go to the town website and look for stuff like that.
Well, part of democracy is being active. And if you're not participating, I mean, there are many, many ways for us to get this information out to people. And that
We need a town crier.
Yeah, no, we do have a town crier. It's the internet. You get an email. All you do is sign up for it and you get inundated with all the emails you ever would want from the town of Kennebunkport and all the stuff that's happening.
Right, but then you
If you
get too
choose-
much and you
Well,
glaze over.
that is the individual's decision. on how they
That's the price you pay.
Yeah.
it's there. So, if I miss something, it's on me. There's absolutely, I mean, I don't expect anything more from our town department of communication because whatever I want to get, I can get.
But we don't even, the calendar tends to be all of the meetings of the scheduled committees and not much more. So if
Yeah.
you wanted to know when is election day or when is the last day to register to vote or, it's just never there. Because I think the tradition has been all the scheduled meetings go there. I don't know if that happens automatically or somebody does it, but it doesn't really, our events don't get on it. If we're having a forum with a speaker, it doesn't go on that calendar unless it's at our meeting.
I do agree with Paul. I mean, I feel if the committees are functioning well and they're offering these opportunities for people to come together as a community, it's through our town government. There should be a place for these. These are really our town government sponsored activities. I'm not talking about what to do on the weekend. I'm talking about events that educate and inquire and provide ways for the town. I mean, we're doing this comp plan, so we have been trying to get people to work with us, and you don't find that stuff on the internet. I think you would find committee events on the town website.
No, so that's a very good point, because I think there is a distinct difference, I think, between between something that's a recreational type event, versus something like this, or talking about the events, like what we had at the known anthem, or any of those other educational pieces that are that are maybe part of town governance.
Right.
I think ultimately and this is this just a thought as this comes forward, but to have committee members take on the responsibility of that the communications piece of that, to say, hey, can like it's like part of my just like you have a chair, vice chair, secretary, somebody who has that task of the communications piece that can proactively reach out to, because within town government, we are a bit segregated in terms of who's responsible for what. And so just to to have somebody that's on their mind, to say, hey, town managers, and can we promote this this activity in these 3 locations, would be, I just tell you that would be helpful.
It would be helpful, and it would be
have
interesting to see if that is or could be a job responsibility for someone that works for the town.
Or
Because
it could
we don't
be
have a
Janet.
communications director, but
Right.
somebody who would take on that segment of this, of town related communications that really do affect everybody in the town. That isn't
right. But I think just from a practical perspective, you're looking at at an existing position that is instead reaching out to all of these groups, trying to capture that information and bring it back in. I'm suggesting kind of the opposite of that.
I think
that the
we should
committees and
contact
groups
that
push,
person. Yeah,
push that. Right, exactly. Push that
Exactly.
information back.
totally.
And
it
then-
might be.
Sound like
It
a
might be
plan.
it might be this could be self-executing. You set up a Google Calendar type program, I'm sure this exists, where you give, writing rights to the chairman of the nonprofits in town, the chairman of the committees in town. And I mean, it's also a big problem. I plan my big event for the year, and I find out that this other committee is planning, or this other charity, or this other whatever has planned something for the same day. And if there were a calendar that I could access as the Rotary communications person, and put my event I wanted to promote in a very simple way onto a calendar, the public could see the calendar, and leaders of every committee and club in town could see it, and everybody would all be the better. And
Right,
it wouldn't
you visit
require
that
a staff.
calendar to see if you can do your event that day. And you go back to your group and say, listen, that day is taken. We have to reschedule. We have to find another day. But I agree with Paul. It's like scheduling major tests for high school kids. And everybody's getting the same test on the same day.
Ideally, in this day and age, it wouldn't require a staff person. It would require the right program.
Well, that's a good point.
Eli,
Excellent point.
can you say what you wanted to recommend again? So I can hear it, or everybody can hear it.
In 12, he said,
I'll go back to just the, and I don't know. I think the concept of like, some type of Google Calendar that, or something along those lines that staff can have access to is fine. I will go back to the, to the point of not having other outside groups be able to modify information on a town website.
Yeah.
So I think that just
related business.
I just think that we really want the town website to be under control of town admin.
I guess my point is this may not be a town website at all. This can be an independent thing that the town helps to foster, to get moving, to create it, and then maybe it has a life of its own. Maybe somebody picks it up. Maybe it needs, someone volunteers, like a David James kind of person.
I was just going to say, Dave James, look what he's doing.
Well, he's already doing a lot. But somebody like David James, who just wants to be the moderator of it. A great
volunteer position.
Town could put their events on it. And so could nonprofits. And, maybe you say no commercial, whatever.
Right.
Then I think you put on there saying encourage, outside, not a third party or something that would allow the public to have it.
I think his language was broad enough.
At that point, I think you're going to start. I think it creates, whatever subjective events and whatever that could, I kind of see where what is going, where we don't want certain stuff to be on the town website, or
you need to vet that type of stuff. You get too many cooks in the kitchen, then you don't know what you're gonna wind up with.
We're spending too much time on this, and I think Eli's language works.
I'll read it one more time. So it's encourage businesses, nonprofits, and the RSU 21 to better communicate with residents and others about cultural programs in an organized and central location, such as a community calendar. And the primary person tasked is going to be the library. Not that the library necessarily will run it or whatever, but just that they may be the best position to try to help get it going.
Okay.
That sounds fine with me until Janet comes back and tells us we need somebody else to be.
I'm a volunteer. I'm not a staff member. But I know Mary Lou just hired a media person, so this might be helpful.
And so then
let's move on.
Yeah, I think we've
Thank you.
13, so I think we're gone over 14. Okay.
Yep, we good. Yeah, we went over 14. So now we're into maintain and expand access to the shore and rivers for recreational uses. Policy there is enhance public access to the water for recreational use. First strategy there, create a public boat launch. That's listed with a board of selectmen.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a strategy. I think that's been in a comp plan for many years. I think it's one that, we're a waterfront community. It's important to, to keep that one in there. But
Agree.
next strategy, install signs that indicate points of interest, parking, and public rights of way to the water. Publish a list of the rights of way. Slight modification to that. We say where parking is appropriate, install signs that indicate points of interest,
Mm-hmm.
parking, and public rights of way to the water.
Mm-hmm.
We have that as Rec Committee and Chamber of Commerce. Ironically, I actually think that that Maine DEP did a project and has a resource that really does the same thing. This was already done, for the coastal communities where there was some mapped identification of public access points, to the
Except
water.
that nobody would ever know to look to the DEP to find it, and it would never be found.
I'm not saying that
Even
it
if I
was an
told you
easy
it was on the
find.
even if it was on the DEP website, I bet I couldn't find it.
Yeah. So why do we have the Chamber of Commerce?
Let's say so.
in that?
Yeah.
What's the purpose of the Chamber of Commerce being on?
No, so that's a good question. I mean, that may be one that we remove
strike it.
the chamber from that one.
Yeah.
You know,
It's either
and-
highway department or
That's right. Public
Yeah.
Works could be,
public
this
works.
should be, Rec and Public Works.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, next goal, prepare for climate change. Policy is integrate climate vulnerability and adaptation into recreational planning efforts. We have as a strategy, avoid developing new facilities in areas that are vulnerable to sea level rise and inland flooding. I think, we have this similar, strategy in numerous other locations.
Because
I think
in those it says public facilities, right? In those
Right,
other
that's-
locations.
that's
So we
correct,
could
yeah,
remove
and-
this.
We're talking about public facilities, right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Next strategy is acquire land in
Oh,
strategic locations to act as a buffer from sea level rise and inland flooding. I think we just had a note in here, consider moving if not already stated, but to instead identify undeveloped land that is vulnerable to sea level rise and make recommendations on acquisition to act as flooding buffer.
If a piece of property is already going to be is going to be consumed by sea level rise, it's already going to be in a shoreline zoning. Why would we encourage buying property just to make sure nothing happens to it?
Well, I think the concept is, it's not that to make sure nothing happens to it, it's to allow for that land to be a receiver of water and not
Yep.
a further flooding hazard for other properties. The more these kinds of properties would get developed means that everybody else is going to have their property value theoretically reduced because their flooding is getting worse. So if you had 100 acres that fit this criteria, we haven't had obviously the horrible storms and the property damage, but this is what, in places that have had it, they're doing this all over the place.
Yeah, and so practically speaking, for Kennebunkport, a lot of the land that that would fit within this criteria here, that is undeveloped, is already either acquired by Rachel Carson or other
The
entities
trust.
or the trust. Yeah, this is all.
Conserved already.
I would
So why I
so there I think, and remember what it says here is it's identifying that land.
Yeah.
You know, we haven't gone through a process to say, all right, here's land, undeveloped land, you know, identified, you know, that one could consider for this. That's what the
Mhm.
strategy is saying, is go through that exercise to identify these undeveloped pieces. You know, and that you have that as an inventory.
Yeah, then make a recommendation on whether the town acquires it, right? That's the second piece.
That would come later.
That's right. That would come later.
And the public could decide at that point whether that's an
right.
important enough thing to do and spend public dollars on
Right.
or not.
Yeah.
It would be a public,
Correct.
you know, kind of question.
Yeah.
So, the only thing I would consider, you made a good point there, Paul, about, you know, developing that land and the impact that could have on other existing properties. And I'm wondering if we have a strategy that sort of deals with that more from a performance basis on developing that land. In other words, keep the town out of having to buy land to stop
Right,
that. Right, and put something on the person who owns it. Okay, you're going to develop it. Well, these are the things you're going to have to do so it doesn't impact, you know, all your neighbors' property.
We shouldn't be buying property.
Right. Yeah. That would be where I'd want to put our teeth.
Well, you don't want the guy who owns the lot, the land that is suddenly became, the flood maps have changed or a particular storm happened and his land has a diminished value because it got washed over, let's say. But you would want to, I would think you would want to have the flexibility in public policy to say, you know, yes, this is a vulnerable property that the town should retire and make permanently a wetland. And if a willing property owner and a willing public wants to do that, that should be their right to do. And often in these kinds of things, the state will throw in money, the feds will throw in money, and the state pays, you know, some percentage. You know, again, we've been lucky, very lucky, that we haven't had, you know, this kind of dramatic action like has happened in New York and in New Jersey and in other places, because we haven't had the right storm.
Right. We don't have a list of repetitive loss properties, you know, that a lot of other communities have. It's, you know, we've been fortunate that we don't have that. You know, if we did have that, you would see that as a strategy, you know, that would support the acquisition of repetitive loss properties. And the reason why you would have that then written as a strategy is to do exactly what Paul said, is that you know, that supportive language really allows for the encouragement to get those, you know, to get that money that's available, that FEMA money and the state money that's available for acquisition of repetitive loss properties.
What percentage are they throwing in on that kind of stuff? I mean, are they throwing in 80% of it?
Yeah, in some case it's the whole thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it isn't necessary. This, repetitive loss property acquisition is not necessarily a local responsibility. In many cases, that's something that's addressed, by FEMA.
Mm-hmm.
But
there's a little town near me. My town flooded growing up, and there's a town like 15 miles west, the slightly different river. And I just heard the other day on NPR that there are 270 homeowners who filed papers to get their properties bought.
Wow.
Because of
Millstone?
repetitive
Where
loss.
was this?
Manville.
What town?
Manville.
Manville?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. First asbestos and then water.
Yeah.
Let's hope we don't show up like New Jersey then. Because I'm not sure
Oh.
tax dollars being used for that.
All right, I'm okay with the strategy.
All right. We're getting off
Okay.
task again.
We are.
Sorry.
we'll move on to the next one.
Yep.
So, identify recreational assets that are vulnerable to sea level rise. And we're just going to leave that one as is.
Okay.
Next policy, incorporate adaptation strategies into facility design. strategy number 1, increase the canopy cover at parks to provide shade. We're tweaking that slightly to say review parks for adequate canopy cover and plant additional, I should say shade trees,
Mhm.
When necessary.
Good.
So,
Good, that's much better.
next strategy, incorporate water features such as splash pads to help keep visitors cool. We're suggesting that we just remove that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I like a good splash pad.
I like a
Much
good
as a new one.
sprinkler. too.
Yeah, it's
Run
called
through the
Goose Rock
sprinkler.
Beach.
Yeah, right.
So,
To go to the beach.
next strategy, use pervious pavements and other green infrastructure in parks to reduce stormwater runoff. And this, again, based on our other discussions, we're saying evaluate the use of pervious pavements and other green infrastructure in parks to reduce stormwater runoff. And that's rec committee and public works. We want the folks that are going to have to, work with and maintain that to have a stake in
Right.
that decision.
We say pervious surfaces. Again, maybe sort of what Paul was saying earlier.
Yep. Yeah, we could do that. We could change pavements
Surface.
to surfaces.
Yep.
Good.
All right. So next section here, hazard mitigation. So goal number 1, mitigate vulnerability to natural hazards, human-made hazards, and climate change. Policy, plan and prepare for hazards. And so what we're saying here is, we're adding, the phrases continue, continue to with each item that we have here. So first strategy, continue to participate in multi-hazard mitigation plan updates and encourage public participation in this process. We're suggesting that we remove public works and planning department, from this. And this is the public safety committee is the responsible, it's already, we already have these types of things are already set up in the town's hazard mitigation plan. And this is under the authority of the public safety committee.
Good.
Next strategy, partner with regional entities and communities to enhance evacuation route planning and community education on evacuation routes. Again, this is another one where we just add continue to, and we leave that with public safety committee. Next strategy, continue to partner with regional entities and communities to identify additional options for shelters. And that also just remains with the public safety committee. Next strategy, continue to incorporate planning for pandemics into existing. Well, I don't know that we have a continue to. This is probably I'd say this is likely a new one here. Yeah. Incorporate planning for pandemics into existing hazard mitigation and emergency operation plans to increase preparedness for future pandemics. Hey, who'd have thought we'd have been adding that one? And so that one is emergency management and public health. Next strategy, encourage participation in the National Flood Insurance Program. And that's code enforcement officer, and we're also adding the planning department to that. Next strategy, participate in a National Flood Insurance Program's community rating system to reduce the community's vulnerability and policyholders' flood insurance premiums. And we're recommending that be changed to evaluate the applicability of the community rating system in Kennebunkport. And that would be code enforcement officer and board of selectmen.
What does that mean, Werner? Can evaluate applicability?
Well, so the community rating system is a very extensive process and program that a community has to go to in order
Right.
to achieve a rating. And in order to really achieve a high rating with this, the administrative burden to administer this program is pretty high, and FEMA doesn't necessarily scale it based on community size. It's more about the things that you do, and they've got a pretty complex, point and rating system that you have to go through in order to get this. And really what it does is it just gives the community a rating number that translates into a percentage reduction on flood insurance premiums. And
So how significant or material is that? If my old house at Goose Rocks is suddenly in the new floodplain and I'm not above the elevation required, and all of a sudden my premium is going to go from whatever in today, and in 5 years it's going to be, significantly higher. If the town had participated, what would be the impact?
You potentially would see a percentage decrease in your flood insurance premium.
I know a percentage, Werner, but is it 1% or 99%?
Well, no, it won't ever go to 99%. I want to say that, and don't take this as gospel, but the most that you get up into is somewhere in a 20 to a 30% range on that, and those are communities that have a pretty high, they have a pretty high rating, so it's on a 1 to 10 scale. And I think there's only somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 or 2 communities within the United States that have that, that full rating.
So as long as there's a process to evaluate that in public, so public interest is considered and the impact on taxpayers, I would say that's great. And you've said that, so that's fine.
All right, so the next strategy, educate the public about hazards and strategies to avoid potential damage and injury. This is emergency management and the planning department. Next strategy, keep the town's emergency operation plan current. And we're suggesting just this goes to emergency management and not the public safety committee. So that's under the,
Right.
that's already how we operate. That's emergency management that's responsible for that. So next policy, increase community resilience to climate change impacts. First strategy, complete the main flood resilience checklist to assess coastal vulnerabilities. We have that with the planning department. Next strategy, assess non-coastal vulnerabilities to establish a comprehensive understanding of current and future climate change impacts to people, infrastructure, and natural resources. And so we're adjusting that to read, as part of the climate action plan, assess non-coastal vulnerabilities to establish a comprehensive understanding of current and future climate change impacts to people, infrastructure, and natural resources. So we're just identifying that that's part of the climate action plan.
And that's defined someplace?
That's something that the town is currently in pursuit of, putting that together.
Okay.
Next strategy, seek funding from the Federal Emergency Management Agency and other sources for projects that will increase understanding of vulnerability and mitigate vulnerability. And we're expanding that a little bit to compile a list of applicable grant opportunities that'll fund projects that will increase understanding of vulnerability and to mitigate vulnerability. That's Board of Selectmen and Planning Department. Continue to participate in regional efforts to assess and mitigate vulnerability. Board of Selectmen and Planning Department. And hey, here we have one for you all. Incorporate climate adaptation into future updates to the comp plan. In other words, what we're doing tonight.
Yeah, I would say continue to.
Yeah, right, continue.
That's right. Yep, that would be a good
Yes.
one to
Continue
add
to.
continue to. Next strategy, incorporate hazard mitigation analysis into planning and zoning reviews, open space preservation, land development regulations, stormwater management, coastal management, and building codes. We just simplified that to say incorporate hazard mitigation analysis review into planning and zoning reviews. Next strategy, ensure adequate funding and support for hazard identification and mitigation, advocate for emergency services, critical infrastructure protection, and ongoing health and safety services. Again, we kind of simplified that a bit with saying ensure adequate funding for emergency services, critical infrastructure protection, public health services, and hazard identification. We're also adding to that budget board and town manager, since this is a funding strategy.
Hey, can I see a hand up from Robin? Can we let her in at appropriate time?
Sure. I would just,
I don't
I think
know.
we should add mitigation to 18 because it has identification. Mitigating it's the where you need the funding, really.
Yeah. So ensure adequate funding for emergency services, critical infrastructure protection, mitigation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hazard identification and mitigation, or just
And
hazard
mitigation.
mitigation.
Right.
And that's where you need the money. Okay. Yes, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about attendance, but then when I was listening to your flood insurance and the town involvement, does that mean, I mean, I think now it's mostly the banks. Does that mean you, as a town, you're advocating for the town to have some say in who has flood insurance, or what does that exactly mean?
No, so what this, so I'll just scroll back up to this. So encourage participation in a national flood insurance program. So that's a requirement of any federally backed, mortgage, that anybody has if you're located within a flood zone. And so really what this is that, when folks come in, and they're looking at doing anything with their property, and they're located within a floodplain, we're going to encourage them that they have that they have adequate flood insurance. And those policies, are primarily come through the National Flood Insurance Program. The town participates in the National Flood Insurance Program. It's optional for a community to participate in that, but it's not really optional in the sense that if a town doesn't participate, it significantly hinders your access to federal disaster aid funds. So, we say it's a choice, but it's not really a choice. There are significant detriments to communities that don't participate in the NFIP.
Yeah.
But that's all that is just that, we would always encourage folks to participate, in an insurance program.
Wouldn't that be built into their mortgage or their, you know what I mean? Like, why would that be in the,
Some people don't have mortgages.
Yeah, some people don't have more, they just write a check.
So wouldn't they just be up the creek, literally?
Yeah,
Yes.
could be.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so.
It would be encouraging them to understand that this is available. You're now in a
Right.
flood zone. Maybe you weren't before. And, you should call these people to see what it would cost you to get,
Right.
given your property and everything.
But you're not talking about writing that into, the code where.
No,
No,
to be clear, that is not so communities can't require people to have flood insurance. Like that's not within the scope of any community's, authority to, require, flood insurance for a property. That's purely, that purely falls within, within the scope of, anybody who has an ownership interest. It's your property. If you own it outright, you have the choice, to decide whether or not you want to insure it or not.
Right. I was just curious. And participation, please.
We have 7 panelists, and we did have 2 attendees, and now we have 1.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
All right, so next, coordinate with other communities in the region. And so the next policy here is maintain cooperative agreements with nearby communities that are mutually beneficial. So that's strategy, support regional efforts such as the Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission's efforts, bicycle and hiking trails, shoreline trolley network, police and emergency communications, emergency management, fire and ambulance, mutual aid, potable water supply, RSU 21, solid waste. Boy, I think we threw them all in here. And recycling, Kennebunk River management, aquifer protection, water testing at Little River, right, lots of commas, and the regional sustainability and resilience programs. I think, yeah, we cleaned that up a little bit on our recommended language here. Was continue to support regional partnerships with SMPDC's regional planning efforts, including things such as regional sustainability and resilience program, bicycle hiking trails, continue the interlocal agreements with neighboring municipalities for programming, including the Kennebunk River management, aquifer protection, water testing, and others. So we have that as we just leave that overall with the Board of Selectmen. So next one, I actually think this was a new one.
This was, we basically just took number 3 and we split it.
Yeah.
Because it to kind of separate essential services and other services.
Yeah.
Good.
So yeah, so you can see that one here is it's just that, specific to regional partnerships for police and emergency communications, emergency management, fire and ambulance, mutual aid, KKWD and RSU 21. So.
Okay.
Good.
And next strategy, partner with other local governments to plan and achieve sustainability. We have Board of Selectmen and Planning Department. We have continue our partnership with other local governments to plan and achieve sustainability. So since that's an activity that we're already engaged with.
Okay.
So I think we're at a good point here. Before we dive into fiscal capacity, I do, if everybody's good with pausing at that, at that point. So before we start jumping into another chapter.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're going to give us 6 minutes off?
No. So I do just want to, address, I sent an email to you all, I think it was last week, about talking about hybrid meetings. And so I did get us out of being the guinea pigs for the first, for the first hybrid meeting, since it was, we originally, the plan was to start in, this month. And so the Board of Selectmen are going to, have the first hybrid meeting, which is a combination of in-person and Zoom on the 14th. And then to follow will be, growth planning, planning board, the other quasi-judicial boards. So that's, your zoning board of appeals, the other ones that meet, on a regular basis. So what will be forthcoming will be a a memorandum coming from Lori Smith, the town manager, just in terms of kind of expectations and operations that, so that all the committees are looking at this and dealing with this, all the same, so there'll be a policy that, will come from her regarding that. We're working through, with Dave and Michael, figuring out, the technical pieces, on how, that may operate with guests. I think generally speaking, growth planning is going to be, relatively simple. We'll hope for that one in terms of how we operate. I do know that the general expectation is that, is the hope that committee members will be in person, unless there's an extenuating circumstance, regarding maybe a work commitment, or something of that nature, or illness. So, but I'll let the policy that comes from Lori speak to that. But
okay. That's fine. Are they looking, because we will have people that will travel or will be ill and do want to participate as a panelist. Are they looking at the technology to have that? We've had that done before.
Yeah. So, really what we're looking at, doing is, we're still going to utilize Zoom for that. That's still the idea, is that we're going to use Zoom, to bring people into the meeting. And so it'll be a mix. It'll just be a mix of where we have, folks back over at 32 North, and folks that'll, generally speaking, I think what we're going to see is that it'll be members of the public that would participate, virtually. Again, since I think what we'll see, the recommendation is that we try to get the board as much as possible within the same room. So, but we'll wait until we get the policy. I don't want to go too much really into it, because I don't have a finalized, version of that yet, but just wanted to put that on everybody's, radar, as we move forward. So
our expectation then is that we'll be on site 32 North Street for our next meeting.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. 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 Yeah. No, it's good. It's good to have you here to, to weigh in on that. Yeah. And I think that, it's, this is the direction that we've been given to move forward with this. I think, at some point you have to, say, all right, we're going to start doing this then. But, obviously we're going to roll this out in a way to where we want to, we want to make sure we're successful with it. So, definitely, Dave, once Lori gets, once she's available again, we'll have that conversation with her, to make sure that we can, roll this out successfully. So we'll keep everybody informed. but also just, want to have that on everybody's radar.
All right. Yep, look forward to the
Is there
letter.
a minimum number of people we need to make decisions and such? Because I'm away on the 19th as well. It's April school break.
We need a quorum.
If you need a quorum, it's 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
You need a quorum
Yeah.
of 3. Yeah. Will she also answer the question within that about if you are on the panel, but you're participating remotely, whether or not you can vote? I mean, I saw that was raised as sort of some of the discussions.
Yeah, that
That should
was,
be clarified one way or the
Yeah.
other. Because
Yeah.
that could impact the quorum, right?
correct. Yes.
So,
Good point.
yeah. If I have a vote, I would say I would allow them to vote.
Yeah.
But, there could be some state law requirements, so. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, I think, if you're going, and this is just my reaction to that, Dan, but that if you're going to recognize, board members as participants, in this, in a hybrid situation, I would think that you need to have some allowance to allow them to vote, at
I
that
agree.
point, because otherwise, I don't know other than just the fact that they're participating,
Right.
I think that's a very valid point, and I would agree with, the support of that. So,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it'd be good.
so we'll keep you all up to date, as soon as I hear, anything, new, we'll make sure we pass that info along.
Okay.
So,
All right, so we're a little bit past, but I would like to address the minutes that Janet worked on. We'll put those up. Only thing I wanted to add or to modify slightly is when I referenced I wasn't referencing the whole plan, Janet, but it was the strategies themselves, that we will provide those to the different groups that we've identified as the main owners, and give them the opportunity to review those strategies, tweak them if they don't make sense, or say, hey, we can't do this, or we're not the right people. Just get their input, because at the end of the day, we want their buy-in before we go to the vote.
Was it
So-
unclear?
I think you had a little more general as a review of the whole plan. That's the way I read it anyways.
Oh,
versus-
you wanted me to include the word strategy.
Yeah, I just wanted to
Good, I
focus it
can- I
really
can
on the
definitely-
strategy piece.
I can definitely put that in. I
Okay.
will amend them.
Okay,
No problem.
so I make a motion to accept them as amended.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Yeah,
Nope.
oh, sorry. I'll let you finish that, and then I just
Okay.
wanted to mention something.
Any other
before you
discussion on a minute? Assuming that, all in favor? Aye.
Hi.
All right. Thank you very much, Jim.
You're welcome.
Okay, Eli, anything else?
Yeah, just on that note, I just wanted to mention and acknowledge all the work you guys did tonight. You cruised through a lot of strategies. And as you'll probably notice, there's only about 30 left. But at the next meeting, we'll still have a full meeting. We're beginning to get the feedback back from different department heads and organizations. So we'll jump right into that, because we're doing good work, but we are still on a pretty tight timeline to make it to our goal. So,
Okay,
so we'll make sure that everyone has those still next Tuesday. So you'll have it ahead of time, but I just thought I'd mention it so you know that it's coming your way.
very
Thanks.
good.
Thanks,
Thank
Eli.
you.
So
Eli.
so the next meeting is the 19th. And we'll hear about hybrid or on-site shortly.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other
Okay.
discussion? If not, I'll turn it over to Paul.
I make a motion that we end this meeting.
Okay.
I second it.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Hey, thank
Night,
you all for
everybody.
participation.
Aye.
Great.
Good night,
Have a
all.
good night,
Good night,
everyone.
Bye-bye.